The Ashwood Train Station was a relic of a bygone era, with its crumbling brick walls and weathered wooden benches. The once bustling hub had fallen into disuse, its tracks rusted and overgrown with weeds. The station stood at the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods, and was largely forgotten by the residents of Ashwood, except for one night each year when the legend of the phantom train resurfaced. Elara Quinn stood on the deserted platform, the cold night air biting at her skin. She pulled her coat tighter around her and glanced at the old station clock. The hands were frozen at midnight, a reminder of the station's last day of operation over 50 years ago. She had read about the legend of the phantom train in her family's journal, but tonight, she was here to see if the stories were true. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the abandoned tracks that stretched into the darkness. Elara walked along the platform, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The town was quiet, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. But as she approached the end of the platform, she felt a change in the air, a sudden drop in temperature that sent a shiver down her spine. She stopped and looked down the tracks, her breath forming a cloud in the frigid air. The legend spoke of a train that appeared once a year on this very night, a train that carried the souls of the lost and damned. Those who saw the train were said to be cursed, doomed to follow its spectral path until they too became part of its ghostly crew. Elara had always been drawn to the supernatural, but there was something about this legend that unsettled her. The veil between worlds was thinning, and the phantom train was a manifestation of that weakening boundary. If it truly existed, it could be a clue to the greater mystery she was trying to unravel. As she stood there, the silence was suddenly broken by a distant sound, a faint, rhythmic clanking that grew steadily louder. Elara's heart raced as she strained to see through the darkness. A soft, eerie glow appeared on the horizon, slowly growing brighter as the sound of the train grew nearer. The ghostly train materialized out of the darkness, its headlights cutting through the fog like twin beams of the underworld. The locomotive was ancient, its iron frame blackened and covered in rust. The windows of the passenger cars were dark, but Elara could sense the presence of unseen eyes watching her. The train rolled to a stop in front of her, the hiss of steam escaping from its brakes filling the air. The door to the nearest car creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. For a moment, Elara hesitated. Everything in her told her to run, to leave this cursed place and never look back. But her curiosity, her need to understand the truth, was stronger. Taking a deep breath, Elara stepped forward and boarded the phantom train. The interior of the train was like something out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with dark wood, and the seats, once luxurious, were now tattered and stained. A thick layer of dust covered every surface, and the air was filled with the scent of decay. Elara walked down the narrow aisle, her footsteps muffled by the old, threadbare carpet. The car was empty, but she could feel the weight of the souls that had traveled this path before her. She knew she wasn't alone, even if she couldn't see them. As she reached the end of the car, a soft whispering filled the air, like the rustle of dry leaves. The voices were faint, barely audible, but they seemed to be calling her name. She turned, trying to pinpoint their source, but the whispers seemed to come from all around her. Elara! Elara! Her heart pounded in her chest as she continued down the train, moving from car to car. Each one was the same dark, decaying, and filled with that same oppressive atmosphere. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they were a cacophony of voices all speaking at once. Elara, you cannot escape. Finally, Elara reached the front of the train. The door to the locomotive was slightly ajar, and she could see the flickering light of the firebox within. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, the heat from the firebox a stark contrast to the chill that had permeated the rest of the train. The locomotive was empty, but the controls were moving on their own, as if guided by an invisible hand. The fire in the firebox roared, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Elara could feel the power of the train, the dark energy that fueled it, and she knew she had to stop it before it reached its destination, wherever that might be. She approached the controls, her hand hovering over the brake lever. But before she could pull it, a figure emerged from the shadows, a ghostly conductor, his face gaunt and eyes hollow. He reached out a skeletal hand, pointing at her with a bony finger. "You do not belong here, Elara Quinn," the conductor rasped. "This train is not for the living." Elara stood her ground, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "I'm here to find the truth. Why does this train appear? What is its purpose?" The conductor's hollow eyes seemed to bore into her soul. "This train carries the lost souls, those who cannot find peace. It is a bridge between worlds, a vessel for the damned. But it is not for you. Leave now, before it is too late." Elara felt the weight of his words, the despair that hung in the air like a shroud. But she couldn't leave, not yet. There was something more, something the conductor wasn't telling her. "What happens to those who stay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The conductor's gaze darkened. "They become part of the train, bound to it for all eternity. They lose themselves, their souls consumed by the darkness." Elara's mind raced as she considered her options. The train was a gateway, a conduit for the restless dead. But it was also a trap, a prison for those who were lost. If she stayed too long, she risked becoming one of them. But if she left now, she might never understand the true nature of the veil that separated the living from the dead. With a surge of determination, Elara reached for the brake lever. The conductor moved to stop her, his ghostly form passing through her like a cold wind. But she ignored him, her hand closing around the lever and pulling it with all her strength. The train screeched in protest, the wheels locking up as the brakes engaged. The force of it threw Elara off balance, and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the control panel. The train shuddered violently, the lights flickering as the energy that powered it began to wane. The conductor let out a wail of anguish, his form dissolving into a cloud of mist that was quickly sucked into the firebox. The flames flared bright and hot for a moment, then suddenly extinguished, plunging the locomotive into darkness for a moment. There was silence. Then, slowly the oppressive atmosphere began to lift. The whispers faded, the cold receded, and the train's movement ground to a halt. Elara stood there, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had stopped the phantom train. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Elara stepped off the train and onto the platform. The fog had lifted, and the station was once again silent and still. The train tracks were empty, the phantom train having vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Elara looked back at the station, a sense of unease settling over her. The train was gone, but the mystery remained. What she had witnessed was a manifestation of the thinning of the veil between worlds, a glimpse into the darkness that lurked beyond. But there were still so many questions left unanswered. She knew that this was only the beginning. The veil was weakening, and the forces that sought to break through were growing stronger. The phantom train was just one of many anomalies that would arise as the barrier between the living and the dead continued to erode. That evening, Elara sat at her desk, the journal open before her. She scribbled down notes, trying to piece together the puzzle that had led her to the phantom train. The conductor's words echoed in her mind: a bridge between worlds, a vessel for the damned. Elara closed her journal and leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with possibilities. The train was a harbinger, a sign that something far greater was at play. But what? And how could she stop it? As she stared out the window at the darkened streets of Ashwood, Elara knew that she couldn't do this alone. The darkness was growing, and she would need all the help she could get if she was going to face what lay ahead. But no matter what, she would continue her journey. She would uncover the truth, no matter where it led her, even if it meant venturing beyond the veil itself. To be continued. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more supernatural mysteries. The veil between worlds is thinning, and there are more dark secrets waiting to be uncovered. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next episode of Beyond the Veil.